Okay, welcome everybody to a new week. Here we go. Let's take a look at what we're going to do. So, chapter 5 is stress in words. And this takes quite a long time in non-native speech when you're trying to get the different stress patterns in English. So, here are a few rules that you can take into consideration when you're looking at how to pronounce words. Because I can tell you from a native speaker's point of view, that sometimes we don't understand a word when the stress is off. So let's look at some things that we can do to make our pronunciation better, okay? So it says, in words with two or more syllables, okay, two or more, one syllable is stronger than the others. And that stronger syllable is the primary stress. And we have rules on which one is going to be the primary syllable. But just so we know, if we look at the word final, begin, professor, photography, okay? Now notice that those stress syllables can occur at the beginning of the word, at the end of the word, or in the middle of the word. It's going to be based on some of the rules that we have for these words. But here's some common things that you should know. The vowel in the stressed syllable, like this one, the ones that have the capital letters, those are going to be our stressed syllables right there, okay? The vowel is clear. You can really tell that that's the sound of that particular vowel, okay? The stressed syllable often has a little bit of a higher pitch. And most important, the vowel in the stressed syllable is longer, okay? So we're going to hold that vowel a little bit longer than we're going to do in a word that's unstressed. So let's take a look at the word final, okay? So the vowel in the stressed syllable is clear. So we can really get the I sound here, fi, final. And the stressed syllable has a higher pitch, final. It's not final, final. So you hear a little bit of a rising on your stressed syllable. And then most importantly, we put it out a little bit longer, final. Okay, we're going to go final, final. Okay, and the one that's in the unstressed syllable is a little, it's not as pulled out as long. It's not as stretched, as we might say, as the short syllable or the unstressed syllable. Okay, so when we misuse stress, that's when speakers don't understand you. And our chapter 5 and chapter 6 will improve on your ability to predict where you're going to put that word stress. Not only do you practice it when you hear it, but if you can make yourself look at the rule, then the more you recognize words that follow that rule, the better you are going to be at identifying it, okay? So let's take a look. You're going to have a listening activity on CD2 track 1. And you're going to see, is the speaker saying greenhouse or greenhouse? Cities or CDs? Selfish or selfish? Okay, so without that stress, without those pauses, without those pitch changes, we don't know if you are non-native saying, did he say CDs he wanted, or did he say cities? So take a listen to that track and see how much you can determine which of these near likeness words is he distinguishing, okay? And it will be based a lot on stress and how long we hold a particular vowel, and if we make it longer, and if we're going to put our tone higher. Do we say pronouns or pronounce? Okay, so that will be a listening activity for the week for you to do. Let's continue on with our lecture. One thing that students really have is making sure that there's a difference in saying the decades, I guess is what I want to say, the numbers of the decades. When we say 60s, 70s, 80s, 50, okay, things like that. I had a student say one time that that he had a hard time saying 15 versus 50. And sometimes he would say $15, and the customer would get panicked because they thought he was saying $50 instead of Okay, so this is another thing that it can be confusing. So if you stress the wrong syllable, you might be understood. 1% might sound like one person. Okay? If you give syllables equal stress, you might be misunderstood. Tutors might sound like tutors, like two tours. Like I'm going to go on 2 tours instead of 1 tour, tutors, 2 tours. So you have to say tutors. I have many tutors at Saddleback College, or I like to go on 2 tours when I go on when I travel. Okay, so this the decades here is kind of an example. The 60s were the generation of the peace movement, the hippies. The 70s were the have a nice day movement. The 80s is when we didn't have a lot of ethics because of the scandals that we had with the big banks. And the 90s is when we really began to get into the decade of Save the Earth and conservation. All right. So listening activity 2 is you're going to listen to the audio and underline the syllable with the primary stress. So all of the syllables are marked out for you, but as you listen to the audio, underline which of the syllables that have been separated for you, which one do you hear? Okay. Do you hear career or career? Right? Career. You're going to underline that second syllable. Do you hear yourself or yourself? Which one do you hear? Okay. So these are challenging, but as you listen and listen and listen, you will hear it. Check your answers with your teacher. Some longer words have secondary stress. Okay. So it's because there's so many syllables that we have a primary stress and then another stress, but it's not as noticeable as the first stress. Okay, it's not as strong. For example, just the verb to separate has primary stress on the first syllable, separate, and a secondary stress on the last syllable, separate. Okay. Although syllables with secondary stress are not as long as syllables with primary stress, syllables with secondary stress do have clear vowels. So let's do separate again. Separate. Se. Okay, that's our primary, and that has the e vowel. Separate. 8. You can really hear the A sound in that. Separate. Okay, so I'll work on those. It's really good for you. Even though I don't always assign this work, you really should be listening to all the CD activities in the book, even though I only assign to be turned in some of them, okay? It's really to your best advantage. Let's take a look at another rule that will help us with stress, okay? It's always a good idea to learn the stress pattern to every new word. Some word groups, however, have predictable stress patterns. For example, it is useful to know that almost 90%, that's a big percentage, of the 2-syllable nouns in English, garden, freedom, answer, have first syllable stress. Here are some other helpful guidelines. So let's go back to that. 90% of the 2-syllable nouns, they're talking about nouns, have stress on the first syllable. Okay? So listen to Rule Dash 1 and you will hear it. So we hear deadline, lifestyle, meet the deadline, an active lifestyle, stuck in a traffic jam. Okay? So those are all, where's the primary stress? So you should have got it. So put the primary stress on the first or last noun in the 1-word or 2-word compound nouns. So where are they? Airport, laptop, hamburger. So these are compound nouns. That means both are nouns, but when you combine them, so since they're both nouns, you can't stress both first syllables because you've combined them. So the rule is stress the first of those nouns. in a compound noun. So air is a noun, port is a noun. Airport, so stress the first noun in the compound noun. Same thing, lap is a noun, top is a noun, laptop. Hamburger, okay?